Thomas sat across from Lurox in the quiet hum of the diplomatic lounge, a room specially designed to cater to interstellar guests with its neutral tones and adaptable environment settings. The air was tinged with a hint of ozone, a feature to accommodate Lurox's Viridian preferences. "So, Thomas, have you enjoyed our exchanges over the past months?" Lurox's voice carried a melodic quality, his translator device rendering his deep, resonant tones into English. Thomas nodded, his mind racing through the many discussions and shared explorations of human and Viridian history they had engaged in. "Absolutely, Lurox. Your perspectives on galactic history have given me a lot to think about. It's rare to get such first-hand accounts." Lurox's large, opalescent eyes reflected a thoughtful light. "I am glad, my friend. It is for this reason I believe you are ready for a significant aspect of our tradition, a gesture of deep respect and trust among my people." Thomas leaned forward, intrigued. "I'm honored, Lurox. What tradition is this?" "In Viridian culture, when a bond of trust has been established, it is customary to share something of personal value with the bonded individual. It signifies not just friendship, but a deep alliance." Lurox paused, his gaze steady on Thomas. "And what have you chosen to share?" Thomas asked, a mix of excitement and apprehension flickering within him. Lurox stood, his height towering over the table, and with a solemn tone, he declared, "I offer you, for the span of one Earth year, the companionship of my wife, Salira. She is willing and eager to learn of your world as you have of ours." Thomas blinked, taken aback by the gravity of the offer. "Lurox, that's unexpected. Isn't that a big decision?" "It is a decision of great importance, yes. Salira is one of our finest cultural scholars. Her insights will greatly benefit your understanding of our ways," Lurox explained, his voice soothing any alarm that might have crept into Thomas's thoughts. "How does Salira feel about this?" Thomas asked, his concern evident. "She is quite enthusiastic about the idea. Would you like to meet her now? She's here, prepared to begin this journey if you accept." Thomas hesitated, the weight of the offer sinking in. Finally, he nodded. "I would like that. Meeting Salira would be the next step. Then," Lurox gave a gentle wave of his hand, and the door to the lounge slid open. A figure stepped through, a slender Viridian woman with luminous skin and delicate, wing-like appendages framing her face. She moved with an effortless grace, her own translator around her neck. "Thomas, this is Salira," Lurox introduced. "Hello, Thomas," Salira said, her voice a soft contrast to Lurox's. "I have heard much about you and your work. I am looking forward to learning from you." "And I from you," Thomas replied, recovering from his initial shock. "Your husband speaks very highly of your knowledge and insight." Salira smiled, and it seemed to light up the room. "Then we shall make good companions in learning. Shall we start over a meal? I am curious about your Earth cuisine." "That sounds like a perfect beginning," Thomas agreed, feeling the first stirrings of excitement at the new understanding unfolding before him. As they moved to the dining area, Thomas thought about the year ahead. It was certainly going to be an adventure, one that would stretch his understanding of not only Viridian culture but also of how deeply and unexpectedly bonds could form across the stars. Thomas adjusted the table settings in his modest, yet carefully arranged apartment. He had spent hours deciding how to make his alien guest feel at home while showcasing aspects of human culture. A blend of curiosity and nerves coursed through him. Hosting an extraterrestrial scholar was far from an ordinary experience. The gentle chime of his doorbell broke his thoughts. Taking a deep breath, he walked to the door and opened it. There she was, Salira, her luminous skin reflecting the light with a subtle shimmer. She was clad in a flowing garment of soft hues that seemed to shift with her movements, a fabric unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. "Good evening, Thomas," Salira greeted with a warm smile. Her voice, processed through a translator device, carried a musical undertone that added an air of elegance to her words. "Good evening, Salira," Thomas replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Welcome to my home." Salira entered, her large, opalescent eyes scanning the room with keen interest. "Your dwelling is quite different from what I imagined. The colors are warm. It is inviting." "Thank you." I wanted to create a space where we could both feel comfortable, Thomas said, gesturing towards the dining table. I wasn't sure about your preferences, but I prepared a meal with some simple earth dishes. We can start there and adjust if you'd like. Salira approached the table, her gaze falling on the carefully arranged plates and the array of foods. You have put great effort into this. Thank you. I am eager to experience your world through its flavors. Thomas pulled out a chair for her, and she took a seat gracefully. He poured a glass of water for each of them, a gesture Salira observed with interest. Water is significant for you, isn't it? She asked. It is. Essential for life, Thomas explained. Is it not the same for Viridians? It is, but we also consume various crystalline compounds for sustenance. Water alone is not sufficient for us, Salira explained, lifting the glass with delicate hands. As they began eating, Salira sampled each dish with visible curiosity. This, what do you call it? Mashed potatoes, Thomas said, watching her reaction closely. Mashed potatoes, she repeated, savoring the texture. Soft, yet filling. I enjoy this. Thomas chuckled. That's a classic comfort food for us. I'm glad you like it. The meal unfolded with questions and answers flowing between them. Salira asked about the history behind the dishes, the origins of the ingredients, and their significance in human culture. Thomas, in turn, asked about Viridian dietary customs, marveling at the complexity of their nutritional needs. After dinner, they moved to the living area, where Thomas had set up a selection of books, music, and films for Salira to explore. She picked up a hardcover book, running her fingers over the textured cover. This is fascinating, Salira said. Our records are stored digitally or through memory imprints. To hold knowledge in one's hands is a novel concept. It's a tradition that's evolved over centuries, Thomas explained. Reading is as much about the tactile experience as it is about the content. Here, let me show you. Thomas opened the book to the first page and began reading aloud. His voice carried the story's words, drawing Salira into the narrative. Her expressive features revealed her deep engagement with the tale. You humans have a way of weaving emotions into your stories, Salira remarked after a few pages. It is not merely information but an experience. That's the idea, Thomas said. Our stories are how we connect with one another across generations. Salira nodded thoughtfully. I would like to share some of our stories with you as well. Perhaps tomorrow, I can show you how we record and pass down our experiences. I'd like that, Thomas said, feeling the beginnings of a genuine connection between them. As the evening wound down, Thomas walked Salira to the guest room he had prepared for her. I hope everything is to your liking here. If you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know. Salira looked at him, her luminous eyes soft with gratitude. You have been most welcoming, Thomas. Thank you for sharing your home and your culture with me. I look forward to the days ahead. The feeling's mutual, Salira, Thomas replied. Rest well. Tomorrow, we'll explore more of what Earth has to offer. As Salira entered her room, Thomas stood in the hallway for a moment, reflecting on the day. Hosting an alien scholar had seemed like a daunting prospect, but already, he could see how their shared curiosity was forging a bridge between their worlds. It was the beginning of something he knew would shape both their lives in ways he couldn't yet predict. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the cultural center where Thomas had decided to take Salira for the day. The building, a blend of modern architecture and classical art, served as a hub for Earth's rich and diverse traditions. Thomas wanted Salira to see firsthand the depth of human creativity and expression. So, this is where humanity stores its collective creativity? Salira asked as they stepped inside, her opalescent eyes scanning the marble floors and the ornate carvings above the entrance. Not all of it, but it's a good place to start, Thomas replied with a smile. This is an art and history museum. It's where we preserve and celebrate the works of those who came before us. Salira tilted her head, intrigued. You revere those who lived in the past as much as you do those in the present? Absolutely, Thomas said, leading her toward the first exhibit. Our past shapes who we are today. By studying it, we better understand ourselves and the world around us. The first room was dedicated to ancient sculptures. Salira stopped in front of a marble statue of a Greek god, her fingers hovering close to the smooth stone. The detail is remarkable. Your people captured the essence of life in this medium. Thomas nodded. That's one of the things about humans. We're always trying to immortalize beauty, emotion, or even ideals in our art. It's how we connect across time. Salira turned to him, her luminous skin reflecting the ambient light. Do you create such art, Thomas? He laughed softly. Not personally. My talents are more in communication and language, but I do admire those who can craft something so timeless. As they moved through the exhibits, Salira bombarded Thomas with questions about the techniques, history, and meanings behind the artworks. They lingered in front of a massive painting depicting an epic battle scene. This is violent, Salira remarked, her tone thoughtful rather than judgmental. It is, Thomas agreed, but it also tells a story. It's about struggle, survival, and the price of ambition. Art isn't always beautiful in the traditional sense. Sometimes, it's about reflecting harsh truths. Salira nodded slowly. On Viridia, our art is often created to inspire tranquility or introspection. This is different, but I see its purpose. Thomas led her to the music section next. There, an interactive exhibit allowed visitors to listen to compositions from across centuries. He handed Salira a pair of headphones. Try this, he said, pressing play on a piece by Beethoven. Salira's expression shifted as she listened, her luminous eyes closing to fully absorb the sounds. When the piece ended, she opened her eyes and looked at Thomas. This stirs something within. The combination of structured patterns and emotional depth is extraordinary. Thomas grinned. Music does that to us. It's one of the universal languages of emotion. Would you share something of your own? She asked, removing the headphones. Well, I don't play an instrument, but I can sing a little, Thomas admitted, slightly sheepish. Please, I would like to hear, Salira encouraged. Thomas cleared his throat and began to sing a simple, soulful melody. Salira listened intently, her expression softening. When he finished, she clapped lightly, the gesture unfamiliar but clearly enthusiastic. You have a gift, Thomas, she said. Your voice carries emotion so clearly. On Viridia, we channel our voices differently. Perhaps I can show you someday. I'd like that, Thomas replied, feeling a growing sense of camaraderie with her. The day ended with a visit to the museum's cafe, where they shared a modest meal. Salira sampled coffee for the first time, her expression shifting through surprise and intrigue. It is bitter, yet invigorating, she remarked. Thomas laughed. That's coffee for you. It's an acquired taste. As they left the museum and walked back to his apartment, Salira looked up at the setting sun. Your world is rich with contrasts, Thomas. Light and shadow, beauty and harshness. I feel I've only begun to understand it, and I've only begun to understand Viridia through you, Thomas replied. There's so much we can learn from each other. Salira smiled. Then let us continue learning together. I look forward to tomorrow. Me too, Thomas said, genuinely excited for what lay ahead. With every shared experience, their bond deepened, weaving a connection that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. The grand ballroom of the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Gala shimmered with a kaleidoscope of lights and sounds. Delegates from dozens of planets mingled, their languages blending into a harmonious hum. Thomas adjusted the collar of his suit nervously, glancing around for Salira. She had insisted on attending this event together to further immerse herself in human customs. When she finally appeared, stepping gracefully into the room, Thomas's breath caught. She wore a viridian garment that seemed to flow like liquid silver, catching the light and refracting it in subtle rainbows. Her wing-like facial appendages fluttered slightly, betraying a mix of excitement and nervousness. You look amazing, Thomas said as she approached. Salira tilted her head, her iridescent eyes scanning his tailored suit. And you look quite distinguished, Thomas. This is a human celebration, yes? A blending of cultures? Exactly, he replied. It's meant to showcase what we can learn from each other. Food, music, and dance. Everything that defines us. Salira nodded. It is a beautiful idea. I am eager to experience it fully. Shall we begin with the food? Thomas led her to a table laden with dishes from various Earth regions. He pointed out options, explaining their origins. Salira was particularly fascinated by sushi. "These are raw slices of sea creatures?" she asked, holding a piece with her delicate fingers. "Yes, but carefully prepared. It's an art form," Thomas explained. "The flavors are subtle but complex." Salira took a bite, her eyes widening as she processed the taste. "It is unusual but enjoyable. Earth cuisine never ceases to surprise me." After sampling several dishes, they wandered to the music stage. A live band played a mix of human and alien instruments, creating a unique, harmonious sound. Salira tilted her head as the rhythm shifted. "The blending of sounds from different worlds is extraordinary," she said, her voice filled with awe. "Would you like to dance?" Thomas asked, gesturing to the growing crowd on the dance floor. Salira hesitated. "I am unfamiliar with your dances. On Viridia, movement is more ceremonial." "It's not about perfection," Thomas assured her. "It's about feeling the music and expressing yourself." She smiled softly. "Then guide me." Thomas led her to the floor, where he took her hand gently. The music slowed, and they moved in a tentative rhythm. Salira's steps were precise at first, calculated, but as she watched Thomas, she began to relax. Her natural grace took over, and soon they were moving in harmony. "This is freeing," Salira said, her laughter soft but genuine. "Your people express so much through movement." "That's the idea," Thomas said, smiling. "Dancing is about connection, letting go of everything else for a moment." Their closeness on the floor drew some attention, but neither of them noticed. The lights dimmed, and the music softened into a more intimate melody. Salira leaned in slightly, her luminous eyes meeting his. "Thank you for this, Thomas," she said quietly. "I am beginning to see your world in ways I never imagined." "Likewise, Salira," he replied, his voice equally soft. "You've shown me perspectives I couldn't have found on my own." As the song ended, applause broke out, pulling them back to the bustling room. They stepped off the dance floor and found a quiet corner by a tall window overlooking the city's skyline. The view was breathtaking, the lights of Earth's capital stretching out endlessly. "Your planet is alive in a way Viridia is not," Salira remarked, her voice reflective. "Here, there is constant movement, creation, and change. It's chaotic at times," Thomas admitted, "but it's also what makes it beautiful." Salira turned to face him, her expression serious yet warm. "This evening has been unlike anything I've experienced. Thank you for sharing it with me." "The pleasure's mine," Thomas replied sincerely. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the city lights painting their figures with a soft glow. The connection between them had deepened, unspoken yet undeniable, a bridge of shared experiences and growing trust. The sun had barely risen when Thomas and Salira set out for their day-long tour of Earth's wonders. The crisp morning air filled with the promise of discovery as they climbed into a sleek electric vehicle. Thomas adjusted the navigation system, glancing at Salira, who sat beside him, her luminous eyes wide with anticipation. "So, where are we going first?" Salira asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "A beach," Thomas replied, pulling onto the main road. "I thought you might like to see the ocean up close." "The ocean," Salira repeated, as though tasting the word. "You've spoken of it before. A vast expanse of water, unlike anything on Viridia." "Exactly. It's something that defines Earth. You'll see." The drive was quiet for a time, save for the soft hum of the vehicle. Salira's gaze darted between the passing scenery, rolling hills, distant mountains, and patches of forest. "Your planet is so diverse," she remarked. "Each area feels like a different world." "That's one of the things I love about it," Thomas said, smiling. "There's always something new to discover." When they reached the beach, Salira stepped onto the sand cautiously. The grains shifted beneath her feet, and she crouched to scoop a handful, letting it run through her fingers. "It feels alive," she murmured, watching the particles fall. "And the sound, so constant, yet calming." Thomas followed her gaze to the waves crashing against the shore. "The ocean has that effect on people. It's both powerful and soothing. Salira approached the water, her steps measured. When the first wave lapped at her feet, she gasped softly. It's cool. Refreshing. Want to go in? Thomas asked, rolling up his pant legs. We can wait a bit. Salira hesitated but nodded. Together, they walked into the shallows. She laughed as a larger wave splashed against her legs, the sound bright and genuine. You enjoy this, Thomas observed, smiling at her delight. It is freeing, Salira replied, her eyes shimmering as she looked at him. This connection to nature. Your people cherish it deeply. We do, Thomas said. It reminds us we're part of something bigger. After the beach, they drove to the mountains. Salira marveled at the towering peaks, the way the sunlight danced on the snowy caps. They hiked a short trail, pausing often so Salira could examine the plants and rocks. This plant, she said, kneeling beside a cluster of ferns. Its pattern is similar to some on Viridia, yet the texture is different. Nature has its ways of repeating itself, Thomas said. Life finds similarities even across worlds. They reached a small lookout point, where the view stretched out for miles. Salira stood silently, taking it all in. Finally, she turned to Thomas. Your world holds so much beauty, yet it feels transient, she said softly, as though it is constantly shifting. Thomas nodded. That's true. Change is a big part of Earth. It can be hard to keep up, but it's also what makes life exciting. Their final stop was the city. By evening, they walked through bustling streets lit by neon signs and glowing advertisements. The energy of the crowd was infectious, and Salira seemed fascinated by the people. They move with purpose, yet there is joy in their steps, she observed. Do you feel it, Thomas? I do, he replied. It's the pulse of the city, chaotic, but alive. They stopped at a small street vendor where Thomas ordered 2 servings of hot, spicy noodles. Salira took a cautious bite, her eyes widening at the burst of flavor. This is intense, she said, laughing, but enjoyable. It's an adventure. Like today, Thomas said, his grin widening. As they strolled back to the vehicle under the glow of city lights, Salira turned to him. Today was extraordinary, Thomas. Thank you for sharing these parts of your world with me. Thank you for experiencing them with me, Thomas replied, feeling a warmth that had less to do with the day's sun and more with the connection they were building. The drive home was quiet but comfortable. Salira rested her head against the window, her expression thoughtful. When they finally reached his apartment, she turned to him and said, I am beginning to see why you love your world so deeply, and I'm starting to see it through your eyes, Thomas replied, unlocking the door. That makes it even better. Salira smiled as she stepped inside, the day's experiences etched into her glowing features. Together, they were finding something neither of them had expected, a shared appreciation for the universe, one discovery at a time. The evening was quiet, save for the occasional sound of the wind brushing against the windows of Thomas's apartment. The day had been filled with exploration, leaving both him and Salira exhausted. Yet there was a lingering energy in the air, something unspoken that neither of them could ignore. Thomas poured 2 glasses of wine, placing one gently in front of Salira as she sat on the couch. She tilted her head, examining the liquid with curiosity. This is fermented fruit, correct? She asked, swirling the glass carefully. Yes, it's called wine. It's something we often share during special occasions, or when we just want to relax, Thomas said, taking a sip from his own glass. I wasn't sure if you'd like it, but I thought you might want to try. Salira raised the glass to her lips, taking a tentative sip. Her luminous eyes brightened slightly. It is complex, sweet, but also sharp. Your beverages have a way of surprising me. Earth's full of surprises, Thomas said with a chuckle, leaning back in his seat. Salira set the glass down, her expression softening. Today was incredible, Thomas. From the ocean to the city, every moment was like opening a new door into your world. I'm glad you enjoyed it, he replied. Sharing those places with you made them feel new for me too. She studied him for a moment, her gaze warm but searching. You are unlike anyone I have encountered, Thomas. Your kindness, your curiosity. It has changed the way I see not only you but your entire species. Thomas felt a blush creep into his cheeks. I could say the same about you. Meeting you, learning about Viridia, it's been life-changing. Salira leaned forward slightly, her voice quieter now. Life-changing in what way? He hesitated, searching for the right words. I've always been fascinated by other cultures, but with you, it's different. It's not just about understanding your people. It's about understanding you. A soft, almost imperceptible shimmer crossed her skin. I feel the same, Thomas. In you, I see something I did not expect to find among humans. A depth of connection that transcends our differences. The air between them grew heavier, charged with an intensity that was both exciting and daunting. Thomas moved closer, his eyes locked on hers. Salira, I don't know what this is, but I know it's something I don't want to lose. Her fingers, delicate and glowing faintly in the low light, reached out to touch his hand. Nor do I. Their proximity deepened as Salira's touch lingered on his hand, her skin warm and soft against his. Slowly, Thomas reached up, brushing a strand of her shimmering hair back from her face. Her breath hitched slightly at the gesture, and her gaze flickered to his lips. Thomas, she began, but her voice trailed off. He leaned in, his movements slow and deliberate, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she met him halfway, their lips brushing in a tentative kiss that quickly deepened. Her hands moved to his shoulders, while his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss was unhurried, exploratory, yet filled with a passion neither of them could deny. Salira's fingers traced the line of his jaw, her touch sending shivers down his spine. Thomas responded by pressing his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling as they paused for a moment. This feels different, Salira whispered, her voice trembling slightly. It is not like anything I have known. It's the same for me, Thomas said, his voice steady despite the rapid beat of his heart. But it feels right. Salira nodded, her smile radiant. It does. Their intimacy continued, each touch and kiss a step deeper into a connection they had both longed for without realizing it. The night unfolded with quiet murmurs, shared warmth, and an understanding that went beyond words. By the time they finally rested, lying side by side, their hands intertwined, both knew their relationship had irrevocably changed. Thomas, Salira said softly as sleep began to take her, you are more than I ever imagined, and you've shown me a world I never thought possible, he replied, his voice full of quiet wonder. As the night settled over them, the bond they had forged grew stronger, a blend of two worlds united by something neither of them had anticipated. Thomas sat at his desk, scrolling through reports and messages from colleagues. The past few days had been a whirlwind, his growing closeness to Salira a source of both joy and distraction. Yet, as he glanced toward the living room where Salira sat reading, a knot of unease tightened in his chest. A message had arrived that morning from the Interstellar Relations Council, a subtle but pointed inquiry about the nature of his interactions with Salira. It wasn't overtly accusatory, but the undertone was clear. Some thought his relationship with her might be compromising his role as a cultural liaison. You seem troubled, Salira said, her voice breaking his thoughts. She had turned to face him, her luminous eyes full of concern. Thomas hesitated, then set his tablet down. I received a message today. It's about us. Her expression shifted, the light in her iridescent skin dimming slightly. What do they say? They're worried that I'm letting personal feelings interfere with my work, he admitted, leaning back in his chair. They're questioning whether this, our connection, is appropriate. Salira stood, her movements graceful yet deliberate, and walked over to him. Do they not understand the value of what we are building? Our bond is part of this cultural exchange. Thomas sighed. Not everyone sees it that way. Some think it's unprofessional, that it clouds my judgment. She studied him for a long moment, her features calm but unreadable. And what do you think, Thomas? Do you doubt what we share? No, he said immediately, standing to face her. Not for a second. But I hate that it's being questioned. It feels like they're reducing something meaningful to politics. Salira's gaze softened, and she reached out to touch his hand. Your world has its complexities, just as mine does. Fear of the unknown often drives such behavior. Thomas nodded, his jaw tight. But it's not fair to you. You've done nothing but approach this with curiosity and respect. You don't deserve to have your motives questioned. Sala tilted her head, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. It is not uncommon for bridges between worlds to be met with resistance. What matters is how we respond. Her calm steadied him, and he took her hand in his. We'll respond by showing them what this truly means. That it's not about politics or appearances. It's about understanding and connection. Then let us do just that, Sala said. Together. The following day, Thomas invited a few skeptical colleagues to join him and Sala for a cultural presentation. The room was small, intimate, with artifacts and recordings from both Earth and Viridia displayed side by side. Sala stood beside Thomas, her voice calm yet passionate as she explained Viridian philosophies of art and relationships. You see, she concluded, addressing the room, our bond is not an aberration but an extension of this exchange. It is proof that two beings from vastly different worlds can find common ground. Thomas added, and isn't that the purpose of this program? To bridge gaps, to learn not just about each other but from each other. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of their words settling in. One of the council members finally spoke, his tone measured. Your perspective is compelling. Perhaps we have been too quick to judge. As the group left, Thomas turned to Sala, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over him. That was incredible. You handled it so gracefully. I simply spoke the truth, she replied, her smile warm. And you, Thomas, stood by me. That means more than I can say. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. We're in this together. Always. Sala nodded, her eyes shimmering with emotion. Yes, together. No matter the challenges. That evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their connection was more than personal. It was a testament to what humanity and Viridia could achieve when fear was set aside. And he knew, as long as they faced the future side by side, they could overcome whatever lay ahead. Thomas paced the apartment, glancing at the clock for the third time in as many minutes. Today marked the end of Salara's formal stay on Earth, and Lurox, her husband, was due to arrive shortly to bring her back to Viridia. The thought of her leaving left a hollow ache in his chest, one he couldn't shake. Sala emerged from her room, her luminous skin glowing faintly in the morning light. She had dressed in a Viridian robe, its flowing patterns echoing the grace with which she carried herself. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed the same heaviness that weighed on Thomas. Are you ready? She asked softly. Not really, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. I've been trying to figure out how to say goodbye. Sala stepped closer, her voice gentle. It is not goodbye, Thomas. Our connection is not bound by proximity. He nodded, though the words did little to soothe him. I know, but it's hard to imagine you not being here. I've gotten used to us. Before Sala could respond, the doorbell chimed. Thomas hesitated, then opened the door to find Lurox standing there, his towering figure as imposing as ever. Yet there was warmth in his expression as he stepped inside. Thomas, Lurox greeted with a nod. It is good to see you again. I trust Salara's time here has been fruitful? It has, Thomas replied, glancing at Sala. More than I ever could have imagined. Sala approached, her smile serene. Lurox, Earth has been an incredible experience. I have learned so much, not just about their culture but about myself as well. Lurox's gaze shifted between them, his expression thoughtful. And you, Thomas? What have you gained from this exchange? Thomas hesitated, then spoke with quiet conviction. Sala has shown me what it means to truly connect with someone beyond the boundaries of our worlds. She's changed the way I see everything. Not just her people, but my own. Lurox studied him for a moment, then gave a small, approving nod. Good. That is what this exchange was meant to achieve. Salara's gaze softened as she looked at Lurox. Husband, there is something I must say. My connection with Thomas has grown into something deeper than I anticipated. It is more than a cultural exchange. Lurox's eyes flickered with understanding, though his expression remained calm. I suspected as much. And you, Thomas? What do you feel for Salira? Thomas met his gaze squarely. I care for her deeply. She's become part of my life. Letting her go feels impossible. Lurox sighed, a faint smile curving his lips. It seems Salira has chosen well. Chosen? Thomas echoed, his brow furrowing. In our culture, when such a bond forms, it is not uncommon for a Viridian to remain with their chosen companion, Lurox explained. Salira, the decision is yours. What do you wish to do? Salira turned to Thomas, her luminous eyes shining with emotion. I wish to stay. If you will have me, Thomas. A wave of relief and joy swept through him. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Of course, I want you to stay. More than anything. Lurox watched them with a satisfied expression. Then it is settled. Salira, you have my blessing to remain here. Your bond with Thomas is a testament to what this exchange was meant to achieve. Salira smiled, her fingers tightening around Thomas's. Thank you, Lurox. Your understanding means more than I can say. With the arrangements finalized, Lurox bid them farewell, leaving Thomas and Salira alone in the apartment. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the moment settling in. You're really staying, Thomas said, his voice filled with wonder. I am, Salira replied, her smile radiant. Our journey together is just beginning. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, his arms wrapping around her as if to anchor her to his world. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. And I with you, Salira whispered, her voice steady. As they stood together, the city below buzzing with life, Thomas realized that the true gift wasn't just Salira's presence. It was the bond they had forged, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species and worlds. Together, they had created something rare and profound, a love that was as infinite as the stars above.